Rick Lagina just cracked the code. $150 million worth of Templar gold hidden beneath Oak Island for centuries has finally been uncovered. What started as another routine dig exploded into a race against time, as secret chambers and cryptic symbols surfaced, pointing to a treasure bigger than anyone imagined. The island's long-buried secrets are waking up, and every moment counts. This isn't just history. It's a high-stakes hunt where fortune and danger collide. The clock is ticking, and Rick is on the brink of rewriting legend forever. Don't miss a second of this discovery. Smash that like and subscribe button. The treasure is real, and the next revelation could change everything. The storm came without warning, thick clouds rolling in like a curtain, swallowing the sky over Nova Scotia. For most, it was just weather. For Rick Lagina, it was something else. He'd always believed Oak Island reacted to disturbance, shifted when watched too closely, but no one expected the island to answer back. At Shaft 9, a small crew was conducting a routine inspection of a stabilization platform above the garden site. Hours before, seismographs had picked up minor tremors, but nothing conclusive. Then the ground gave way. A deafening roar echoed across the dig as ancient timbers snapped and the shaft caved in. The collapse wasn't natural. It tore downward and sideways, exposing a cavity no one had drilled, no one had mapped. Rick was the first to peer into the dust-choked pit. What he saw didn't make sense. The tunnel that had opened below was too perfect. Walls curved with deliberate intention, not erosion. Under flashlight beams, the surfaces gleamed like molten glass, untouched by time. This wasn't geology, it was engineering. Laird Niven arrived within the hour. He examined the exposed tunnel and whispered just two words: Silex Templarius, a composite stone used by 13th-century Templars, quarried and fused in Crusader outposts across Cyprus and Portugal. The mix hadn't been seen in centuries, let alone beneath Canadian soil. Buried in the rubble was a half-crushed brass container, a reliquary box with a cracked lid and a Templar cross carved into its face. Rick pried it open with trembling fingers. Inside, cedar resin had pooled and hardened, preserving a faint scent that hadn't escaped since the 1300s. The box was empty, but its message was clear. Something had been sealed here, something sacred. The next morning, a sediment core was extracted from the chamber. The layers of earth inside told a story no historian could invent. Roughly 4 feet down, a pale band of untouched medieval pollen marked the last time this chamber was exposed to air, dated between 1308 and 1320. Above it, modern debris. Below it, silence. For over 700 years, the chamber had remained perfectly sealed. Spectrometry analysis revealed something stranger still. Micro-residues of beeswax, frankincense, and olive oil embedded within the soil. These weren't materials used for construction or burial. They were ceremonial, the same mixture used to preserve religious relics in sacred vaults across Jerusalem. Dr. Alessandra Torres, a religious archaeologist flown in from Italy, confirmed the impossible. The site's chemical profile mirrored that of documented holy sanctuaries beneath Acre and Antioch. Not just a hiding place, a consecrated vault. On the floor of the chamber they recovered a broken tile fragment inscribed in Latin, Custos Lumen Aeternum, guardian of the eternal light. Rick stood in silence for several minutes, eyes fixed on the words. The implications were staggering. The Templars hadn't simply fled persecution. They'd brought something with them, across oceans, across time, and buried it beneath the soil of a place the world would one day forget. That night, with the dig suspended and the island in full lockdown, Marty Lagina asked Rick to join him privately in the research trailer. No crew, no cameras, just the two brothers and a single dust-covered crate that hadn't been opened in over 4 decades, It had belonged to Dan Blankenship. Across the top of the crate in black fading ink were the words, "Unverified Octagon." Marty hesitated. "I never showed this to anyone," he admitted. "Not even Dan's son. I thought it was junk. Now I'm not so sure." Inside were hand-drawn maps from the 1960s, most of them warped from moisture and time. One was more intact than the rest. It showed a chamber buried deep in the northeast quadrant of the island, far from the Money Pit or Smith's Cove. Dan had labeled it simply the Off-Axis Vault. Another page showed a series of geometric overlays, chambers aligned with lunar cycles, magnetic declinations, and solstice markers. These weren't construction plans. They were ritual coordinates. More chilling were Dan's handwritten notes, feelings of pressure in the skull, angles that seemed to bend, static electricity across the skin, sounds only heard underground. Rick stared, heart racing. He'd felt those symptoms days earlier, near the collapse site. The nausea, the buzzing in his ears, the strange warmth in the tunnel. He'd dismissed it as stress. Now, it felt like the island had been waiting for someone to remember. Marty gave the nod. For the first time, Dan's private records would lead the excavation. Not out of desperation, but because something ancient had finally moved beneath their feet. And the deeper they dug, the more it seemed the island wasn't just hiding treasure. It was guarding something else entirely. The team moved quickly, Dan's annotations pointing them toward a sublayer no one had ever reached. Within hours, the excavator's teeth hit quartzite. Not naturally deposited, this stone had been placed, layered, aligned. Rick crouched at the chamber's threshold, lantern in hand. His breath caught. The quartzite crunched under his boots as he stepped into the newly hollowed tunnel. The GPR scans hadn't lied. The chamber walls formed a spiral, a descending helix that coiled with eerie symmetry beneath the eastern quadrant of the island. It wasn't random. This wasn't erosion or collapse. This was designed, deliberate, ancient engineering. The twist in the architecture echoed one of the oldest sacred patterns known to man, the spiral descent into the underworld. Drilling resumed along the newly marked path, carefully tracing the walls inward and down. Each layer offered resistance, like it was built to be a warning. Oak timbers spaced evenly between beds of white clay, too ordered to be natural, too specific to be modern. This was the Templar trap signature, the same layered method they used in castles to collapse passageways if disturbed. Yet here, it wasn't collapsing, it was guiding. At 30 feet below the last known floor, the drill head struck something unexpected. Open air. A cool draft surged up the shaft. The team stopped instantly. This wasn't just an old cavity. The air was pure, undisturbed, preserved. When the crew finally broke through, a carved archway emerged, its top beveled with chisel marks, worn but legible. Rick brushed the dust aside and read the Latin aloud. In lumina tuo videbimus lumen. In your light we shall see light. The passage beyond was unlike anything they'd encountered. The walls narrowed and curved, polished quartzite slabs marked at intervals by keystone engravings, crossed swords, a lamb, a compass rose, each one traced with pigment residue, iron oxide, maybe even ochre, symbols of guardianship, warnings, invitations. They weren't sure yet, but the spiral stairway that unfolded beneath them was fully intact. Each step cut from solid quartzite and laid without mortar. No modern machinery could have done this so seamlessly. Even Laird was stunned. They built this with geometry we don't fully understand. Either they had precise architectural plans, or something else was guiding them. As they descended, they realized the spiral wasn't symmetrical by accident. It aligned to light. Channels in the walls bent natural surface light downward, refracting it around the curve. At certain times of day, the corridor would have glowed on its own. Divine geometry in motion. What awaited at the bottom was a chamber that defied expectation. An octagonal vault carved directly into the bedrock with 5 colossal thrones arranged in a circle, each facing inward toward a raised altar platform at the center. The chamber's acoustics were haunting. Even a whisper echoed like prayer. Each throne bore a crest. The first, unmistakably Templar, the double horse sigil. Second, the 8-pointed cross of the Knights Hospitaller. Third, Sinclair, an oak tree entwined with a sword. Fourth, de Molay's sigil, chipped but present. And the fifth, a mystery. A gnarled tree wrapping around a serpent, its roots bound in chains. They approached the altar, barely breathing. Resting atop it was a black triangular slab, obsidian, cool to the touch and carved with an impossible etching. A map of Oak Island, but not just the surface. This was a 3D contour map of subsurface chambers, tunnels, energy lines, and rune-encoded seals. It marked not only where the team had already dug, but where they had never thought to look. And worse, it suggested this altar chamber was only one node in a far larger network. Rick called in additional ground-penetrating probes to scan directly beneath the altar. What they found made his voice catch. There was a vault buried just a few feet down, metallic, cedar-lined, and sealed in lead. A triple-layered protection design. Whatever was inside had been meant to survive anything. When they opened it, the silence was total. Inside, gold. Bars upon bars, stacked and bound in a manner suggesting transportation, minted but never distributed. With it, iron-bound codices inscribed in ancient Latin and Old French. But between the bars and books lay something that silenced even the dig crew's usual mutterings. A full human skeleton, encased in what looked like gold leaf, thin but encompassing. The figure was in repose, arms folded over a chest that bore an engraved relic cross. No rot, no mold, just a kind of preserved reverence, as if this person had been meant to wait for centuries. DNA analysis, rushed under strict non-disclosure terms, came back within 48 hours. Male, born around 1270, of Middle Eastern descent. Genetic markers matched historical Crusader bloodlines from the Jerusalem region. This man had walked the Holy Land before the fall of Acre. Religious historians and forensic analysts both agreed. The man had likely been embalmed and entombed as a martyr, possibly even a high-ranking Templar officer who carried part of the order's most sacred trust. And in his folded hands, a codex unlike the rest. It bore no title, just the Templar seal and a wax-marked label. 5th Vault Protocol. Inside, a ritual manual, pages thick with symbolic schematics, ceremonial diagrams, and preservation instructions for relics not intended for kings or cardinals, but for the world's final keepers. It didn't end there. The final pages of the Codex included something that sent shivers through everyone on the team. 7 sets of global coordinates. One of them pointed to the coast of Peru. And that's when Marty realized this wasn't just the end of a mystery. It was the beginning of a global map. But by morning, everything had changed. Somewhere in the transfer process, between the team's secure footage and Rick's off-island backups, a leak occurred. Maybe it was sabotage. Maybe it was surveillance. But by 12:07 a.m., the sacred became public. The footage surfaced on a fringe European server. Grainy, clearly drone shot, but unmistakable. 5 thrones carved into stone. Gold bars stacked like forgotten currency. A triangular slab, obsidian black, etched with runes and glowing under the beam of an LED lamp. The file was titled Chambre du 5e Gardien, Chamber of the 5th Guardian. By sunrise, it was viral. Within hours, major media networks picked it up. Speculation ignited like wildfire. Was this Oak Island's long-rumored Templar horde? Who leaked the footage? And more urgently, who owned the rights to what had just been uncovered? The Canadian government issued an emergency communiqué before noon, citing unauthorized archaeological activity and potential violations of international heritage laws. UNESCO, blindsided by the scale and implications of the find, released a stern statement demanding immediate suspension of all excavation and full transparency. The Nova Scotia Department of Natural Resources dispatched legal teams to the island. But the internet didn't wait. Reddit forums exploded. Twitter collapsed into a storm of hashtags. #Templar Gold, #5th Vault, Ark Next. Some claimed the Vatican had kept this secret for centuries. Others insisted the chamber proved pre-Columbian transatlantic Templar voyages. A growing faction online even speculated this was only one vault in a planetary grid, hinting that Oak Island was just the start. Then came Temple Veritas, an anonymous hacker collective known only from obscure darknet messages, hijacked a series of Canadian government servers and uploaded a 14-minute manifesto. In it, distorted voices accused the Laginas of withholding world-changing truth and violating a sacred continuity. But the most chilling part wasn't the accusations. It was the language. They referred to Rick Lagina as Keeper of the Fifth Light, a term never released to the public, a term lifted directly from the final untranslated page of the Fifth Vault Protocol. How they knew that, no one could say. Rick went silent. Production halted. All documentation was locked down. The fellowship fractured, not from distrust, but from fear. Cameras were turned off, not because the show was over, but because it had gone too real, too fast. The island wasn't just treasure hunting anymore. It was geopolitical, spiritual, possibly even mythic. They weren't supposed to take any oath, but the vault had already taken them. Pressure mounted. Protesters gathered near the causeway. Some held signs quoting scripture. Others demanded gold be returned to the people. The Laginas received private threats. Off-island servers containing their research were breached and erased. Experts advising quietly disappeared from the project. It wasn't just governments watching now. It was every secret society and doomsday group with a theory. That's when genealogical records surfaced. Quietly compiled by an independent historian hired years ago to research the Knights Templar presence in Acadia, the family tree cross-referencing Rick Lagina's maternal ancestry was finally complete. It traced through obscure French records dating to the early 14th century. Noble families exiled from the Limousin region after the papal-sanctioned Templar purge of 1307. Names long buried, lines thought extinct. But one name held Lagina, a derivative of Lagina. Even more staggering, the Lagina line intermarried with the Sinclair bloodline in the mid-1400s. The very clan associated with voyages west, carvings in Nova Scotia caves, and the architectural anomalies of Rosslyn Chapel. It wasn't just legend anymore. Inside the chamber, behind the Demole throne, the crew discovered a secondary cavity sealed by quartzite plates. Hidden in its recess was a cedar chest, aged but untouched. Within it, a crimson scroll, wax-stamped with a vine-wrapped chalice. Its title, Custodia Sanguinis, Blood Guardian. The parchment was written in ancient Occitan, once the liturgical language of southern France and the Templar enclaves of Languedoc. It spoke of a right, a succession, a relic trust that could not be fully disclosed until a child of the guardian line stood within the vault. The wording was exacting. Only when the seed of the Western Keepers and the Eastern Protectors converge in flesh shall the fifth seal be lifted. They tested Rick. His DNA matched the criteria listed in the scroll. Markers consistent with both European and Middle Eastern Crusader lineage, at a statistical match rate of 99.98%. He wasn't just a treasure hunter anymore. He was written into it. And then, as though the island itself responded to the blood confirmation, something shifted. New scans revealed yet another cavity behind the main altar wall, a perfectly spherical void shielded by dense mineral deposits. No tools had ever touched it. No radar had previously pierced it. Inside was something impossible? Suspended above the ground, untethered by rope, wire, or support, floated a golden orb the size of a skull, embedded with quartz veins that pulsed softly, rhythmically, like a heartbeat. The room's temperature fluctuated. Compass readings drifted. Phones and lights began to behave erratically. When the orb was approached, it emitted a low-frequency hum, barely audible but measurable. Ionization levels in the chamber increased. The magnetic field bent. They called in Dr. Eliza Khoury, a physicist from MIT specializing in non-conventional resonance patterns and early electroacoustic theories. After 2 days of observation, she offered only this: "It's not a battery, it's not a bomb, it's tuned, like a resonator, and it's alive." Closer inspection revealed engravings. Not words, but coordinates. One led to Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland, another to Rennes-le-Château in France, a third to the Giza Plateau in Egypt. 3 sacred sites, 3 symbols of ancient alignment. Rick stared at it for hours. He didn't touch it. No one dared. But in that moment, standing before a relic that defied modern classification, suspended in space, pulsing with forgotten purpose, he understood. This wasn't gold. This wasn't treasure. It was something older than kings, and it was waking up. The air changed first, thicker, charged, as if the chamber itself had started breathing. The orb's glow deepened to a near-organic pulse, syncing with a rhythm none of them could name. Then came the sound. At exactly 3:33 a.m., the orb emitted a sudden, piercing frequency that echoed across Oak Island. The high-pitched tone wasn't just sound, it was a signal. Crew members scattered, clutching their heads as dizziness and disorientation swept through the excavation site. Electrical systems failed in sequence, lights flickering out, radios falling silent, monitors crashing without warning. The island went dark in an instant, swallowed by a silence heavier than the night. Above, satellites tracked an intense flash of light beaming from the chamber's GPS coordinates. The sudden burst was brief but unmistakable. A beacon fired into the cold void of space. Far to the north, a naval listening post in Greenland intercepted the pattern, immediately identifying it as an ancient Templar maritime cipher, once used to alert hidden strongholds along secret coastlines. The message was clear. The order had not been dormant. Shortly after, Rick's burner satellite phone rang. The screen displayed no caller ID, only 4 cryptic words in a cold digital font: "Do not open sarcophagus." The voice on the other end was untraceable, but authoritative, carrying a weight that froze Rick in place. The team raced back to the vault, now understanding the truth behind the 5th throne symbol, the twisted tree entwined with a serpent. This was not a simple emblem, but an ancient sigil predating the Templars themselves, linked to pre-Christian traditions, and possibly a secret society older than history recorded. Behind the throne's stone base, they uncovered the final, still-sealed vault. Inside lay the 6th vault, home to a codex unlike anything the world had ever seen. Bound in supple serpent leather, its pages were thin sheets of hammered gold, shimmering with a blinding light only visible under infrared scanners. Linguists labored for days to decipher the strange script, revealing a complex fusion of ancient Sumerian cuneiform, Coptic symbols, and classical Greek text. The codex was called the Book of Light. It spoke of celestial alignments and elemental cycles, chronicling a prophecy about The convergence of the Fifth Age, predicted to occur in the year 2033. The words painted a picture of cosmic realignment, of a threshold humanity was on the brink of crossing, guarded by those chosen to hold the bridge between worlds. Marty Lagina wavered, urging caution. "This is too insane. We need to pull back." But Rick's resolve was ironclad. They had come too far. The truth, however unbelievable, had to be uncovered. As they reached the final page, the golden script suddenly shifted, revealing a phrase written in perfect modern English. "You were always meant to find this." The weight of those words hung in the chamber's silence like a final summons. Without hesitation, Rick ordered the chamber sealed once again. Reinforced barriers were installed, blocking entry to the inner sanctum. Only fragmented footage was archived, carefully controlled by Oak Island Tours Incorporated. No relics or gold left the site. No public announcement was made. The dig was closed indefinitely. Months later, whispers circulated in academic circles. A young cryptologist claimed to have obtained a partially decrypted version of the Book of Light from an underground online source, but the critical final diagram was missing, lost to time or deliberate censorship. Rumors followed Rick Lagina's movements as well. 6 months after the closure, he was seen in a series of private meetings with unidentified ecclesiastical envoys at Mont Saint-Michel. Then he vanished for weeks, leaving friends and family with nothing but speculation. The last footage ever recorded on Oak Island shows Rick standing alone at the sealed stairwell, staring down into the depths. His voice, barely a whisper, breaks the stillness. It was never just about treasure. It was a test, and we answered. If you're hooked on this incredible journey beneath Oak Island, smash that like button, subscribe for more hidden secrets, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a discovery.